The Gold Labyrinth level was gigantic in size because the time I thought I had reached the end to it, or thought I was going to end up back where I started, I encountered something totally new. Like lava blockades, new enemies, new statue faces. And I found one statue face at the dead end with a wide, open-eyed stare. The night Melissa died, she had an expression like that on her face. And even when she got hit by a truck, she still had the same expression. I can't help but feel like something is really staring at me from behind the screen when I look at this. I really didn't want to be reminded of that night anymore, so I left the statue almost as soon as I found it. I needed to find the exit anyway, which proved to be no simple task. It felt like this level stretched on forever in all directions. I must have wandered around the level for at least 15 minutes before I finally saw something. It was a creature that wasn't gold, seemingly the only one of its kind. Lacking any kind of hover ability like the other creatures, it just walked back and forth on the platform. But it wasn't there long after I found it. A flying machine swooped down and grabbed it, and then flew off. The machine simply had not seen me, so I decided to follow it, to see where it was taking this creature. The machine stopped at a room with a large cauldron-like object in the center. The machine hovered over the cauldron and dropped the creature into it. The creature came out, emerged from the hole in the cauldron side, now adorned in the same gold color as everything else. The machine flew off. I'm not really sure what to make of this, but I'm glad I came upon it, because I found the exit soon after. When I got back to the board, I realized the bosses hadn't moved at all. A bit odd, but it didn't bother me. It made planning the route through entropy easier. There were still two new icons to explore, the indigo glyphs and the black version of the labyrinth. Since there were only 3 black labyrinth icons, which were surrounded by the bosses, I played the indigo glyphs first. It was a lot like the blue/green mountains. The level graphics had the same shredded look to it. There was also a recolor of the clouds and the moon from the toxic waste dump. The music, if you can call it that, is merely deep rumbling noises. One of the first things I encountered were these multicolored creatures with big heads emerging from the small cave in the ground. They all made a synchronized shaking sound, and they moved to the right in the group after emerging from the cave, thus ignored me. Having no other way to go, I followed them on their route. More and more emerged from the cave until a group had 100 creatures. Eventually, the pathway ended in a cliff. I was shocked to see that upon reaching the cliff, all the creatures began jumping off into the abyss. I've seen enemies walk off cliffs before, but never seen NPCs commit mass suicide like this. Very unsettling to start off a level. I continued on, flying over various strange animals like the one shown here. Another group of multicolored bobbleheads was jumping up and down, only to get snatched up by the large birds, which I'm fairly certain are sprite versions of the giant condor in Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. I defeated some of the condors in battle, but it bothered me that these bobbleheads seem so eager to die. If the game itself is alive, perhaps the creatures in these levels are also alive, and some of them don't have very happy lives, if this behavior is any indication. But what provokes them to do this? In the back of my mind, I almost suspect that the glowing moon in the sky is the reason. At the end of the level, I saw yet another group of bobbleheads marching up to a large monster and being devoured. This was starting to disgust me. So acting on impulse, I fired eye beams at both the monster and the bobbleheads. I destroyed the cave. The monster became angry and ran through the remaining bobbleheads to fight me. Although it lacked any range attacks, it was relentless, but it was no match for me. I was in the home stretch now, up to the bosses. My plan was to go through Batcher first, then Megalon. After that, I would watch the last TV screen, play the Black Labyrinth before fighting Godzilla, and lastly go through the chase with the Hell Beast. I was curious to see if it would be in a new form again. But first things first, time to beat up Batcher. As I expected, he started off in his larva form. His music was Varan's battle theme. Whenever the game puts in a new Godzilla kaiju with more than one form, the other form always shows up. For a game that's otherwise inexplicable, it's rather startling in its consistency and accuracy with the new kaiju bosses. The fight started off simple. Larva Batcher fought in a similar fashion as Magma did, charging back and forth and occasionally firing a lightning from its horn. During the fight, I noticed Mothra's combat capabilities had been altered in my favor. Number 1, the I-Beam did twice as much damage as they did originally. Now they were twice as strong as they usually were, which would be the equivalent of Godzilla's punches. The poison powder was similarly improved. It also did a nice thing where it would actually hit the enemy when you used it. In the original game, even though Mothra could fly, she was unable to fly over an opponent. You would get knocked back the same way as you did if you ran straight into them, which was extremely annoying. But not anymore. I could change direction and fly around, which was a big help because fighting a Mago Batra is much like fighting a clone Mothra, although Batra is distinctly faster and stronger. No longer impeded by its slow-moving larva form, Mago Batra was a fearsome opponent. Although it lacked the horn lightning, it could now fire a more powerful I-Beam. Batra could change direction just like I could, so this battle involved a lot of flipping and flying around. It was pretty damn fun, to be honest. So after defeating Batra, I was excited to see what Megalon would look like. But first, I went to the Indigo Cliffs level and shot a lot of creatures for health power-ups. So, about Megalon, his music was Gigan's theme. Makes sense since Gigan was his battle partner in Megalon's one, and so far only, film appearance. He was a lot like Mogira, but faster, with more weapons. He'd start out charging off with his drills. I liked to fly back and forth around him, which really seemed to annoy him. After a few seconds, he'd step back, turn around, and start spitting out grenades. Those were a pain, because they bounce when they hit the ground. Lastly, he started spamming his lightning beam. It only went straight forward, so it was easy to duck under, and then shoot him with the I-Beam. Overall, I'd describe him as strong, persistent, but very dumb. I was now nearing the end of Entropy. I had just taken down Megalon, and I started up the last TV screen to see what I'd see this time. The result was unpleasant. The music for this gruesome scene was the password theme. I couldn't figure out why this animation was so sinister and violent in comparison to the other two. The whole game seemed to be growing more malevolent. As I went on to the finish of Entropy, I began to feel drained. It's hard to describe, like I had suddenly become tired when I wasn't before. Most likely, it was just from the tension from all that had happened in this game was getting beat, but who knows. The last level type in Entropy is what I call Shadow Labyrinth. The scenery was recolored from gold to black. The music was an evil ambience, similar to the Unforgiven Cold Loop, but distinctly different. The music was my first sign that this level was going to be distressing. I traveled through the maze for about a minute when I noticed there weren't any creatures hovering around. It was odd. It was an odd transition from the Gold Labyrinth, which was overrun with creatures, to this level who had nothing at all. But then this might be a good thing. Maybe there won't be any obstacles and I can get through this level with ease. Then, the screen turned dark. I immediately snapped out of my daze from a few seconds earlier. Everything had been darkened, so the only thing I could see was a monster sprite. I couldn't tell where I was going, and I ended up frantically running into walls. I heard a noise, the sound of a crowd running through a hallway. And along with that came running. With the running came the roars, loud, roaring sounds, which I could only describe as something like a rabid dog the size of an elephant, screaming with fury. And I could tell that whatever was making this noise, there were lots of them. I knew there was something there, but it wasn't until I did some screen cap editing that I got to see what my pursuers looked like. But at the time I couldn't see where they were or where I was going. I was literally running blind, and this mob of beasts eventually caught up with me. All I could say was no, as I saw my life bar rapidly declining. The monsters had taken me down to half my total health. When I was saved, the light came back on, and the attackers had disappeared. And so, the challenge of this level was revealed. Find the exit before the lights go out and a pack of monsters maul you to death. I was in panic mode now, moving as fast as I could go while trying every single path I could find. For a way out, as I played through the level, the lights went out a total of 3 times. The second time, I could have been dead had it not been for the wide-eyed statues. As I stayed close to it, the monsters seemed to avoid all the light until the light came back. The statue warned them away somehow. I was safe as long as I stayed near the statue, but at the same time, I had to leave to find the exit. The Shadow Labyrinth turned out to be much smaller than the Gold Labyrinth, as it only took about 6 minutes to navigate to the end. But before the exit, there was a row of halls leading straight down, with no way out once you entered. You either got to the exit before the monsters reach you, or you died. Thankfully, I made it out. Only one more boss, NES Godzilla. As I started the battle, I got something unexpected. Not only did my life shoot back up to 100% again, which it seems to do randomly, but instead of a replacement boss, I was fighting Godzilla. But any Godzilla fan worth their salt can figure this out. Mechagodzilla started off fighting a clone Godzilla, but his disguise burned away after only 3 life bars. Usually, a transformation only occurred at the halfway point. At this point, it was like fighting Mechagodzilla in a normal game. It felt kinda nice to fight one of the original game enemies for a change, although he wasn't exactly like normal. He also had a rainbow beam and finger missiles. This prevents me from doing the old trick of backing him into a corner and hitting him with I-beams in a spot where he can't hit me. But that was a cheap trick anyway. But after getting him down to half his health, something weird started to happen. His sprite started to glitch, in much the same way that Godzilla had way back in the first world, which was Earth. After a few seconds, the glitches began to form a new shape, and thus the game had created not Mechagodzilla. And I discovered that his visual glitch was somehow related to the game recreating things. The human face on this one gives it a very uncanny look. It was one of the stronger replacement monsters and had the most firepower. Pictured here is its mouth beam, which I got caught in the middle of. Even though it was a bit stronger, it was also slower than its original counterpart, and it couldn't jump around as much. I won the fight by constantly staying out of its line of fire, bombarding the machine with poison powder as I flew over it. One last thing. The Hellbeast chase. Oh boy. Might as well get this over with, I thought. The entropy end chase ended up being exactly what I was afraid it was. A labyrinth. All the other chases, although difficult, were extremely straightforward. All you had to do was run to the right and not get touched. But this took all the simplicity out of it. There was no telling how big this labyrinth would be, or where the exit was. Now, not only did I have to constantly backtrack and find my way out, I was also having to getting hit by the monster, which would kill me in one hit. And for this first 30 seconds, it didn't show up, but I knew it would. As I started picking up the pace, I heard a flapping noise. And there it was, in a flying form. It flew with bat-like wings, and was as fast and relentless as ever. For reasons already stated, this was probably the most nerve-wracking of all the end chases. And as such, I had to keep my focus on the game and not taking screen caps. However, I did take one of the red monsters doing something I found very interesting. I had managed to lose it by going through a different path than it apparently expected, and it was blocked from attacking me by one of those organic red labyrinth walls. Or so I thought. It tried clawing through the wall for a second before opening up its mouth and tearing the wall apart with its intestine jaws. But those brief milliseconds that the monster was held back might have been the key to finding the exit. The path to the exit was long and complex, but I remember I went up and then back towards the left. I'm still not sure why I chose this particular path. Just a lucky hunch, I suppose. I was sweating profusely, but my luck had saved me yet again. I hoped it wouldn't run out before I finished this game. There were only 2 worlds left to go. Now was the penultimate world, called Extus.